a bit about them.
Yeah, my parents came from Kilmanagh. My father had Tipperary connections. His mother came from Tipperary. My mother came from a very well-known place called Tullaroan, which is the home of the hurlers. And they married there, and there was 12 of us in the family. And we had a small farm out in Kilmanagh, and it was intensely cultivated. And we were all reared there. We grew all our own food and things like that. I think the only thing we bought was sugar. We were able to provide everything else ourselves. Now, our menus were very simple and wholesome. And that's how we were brought up. And we went to school in the school, local school, Kilmanagh, which means the Church of the Monks, Kilnamanagh, the Church of the Monks. And we were there in the local school there. And then from that then, I always wanted to be a friar, because the friars used to come around questing, begging for money. And they'd bless us, and they'd bless the cattle and the pigs and the sheep and whatever else was going. And if we were sick, they'd bless us and pray for us and all that. So we had a lot of connections with the friars. There'd be Capuchins now in the city. With the result was that's what really attracted me to them. And if these men were like that, and they were so well liked and loved, which they were, and even to this day, and so I decided I would join them. So I went to a college in Rochester, which was run by the friars, and from there then I went into the novitiate, and that was in 1951. That's a long time ago. And I was ordained in 59. And I was ordained in May in 59, and in November I set sail for Africa, and we were 11 days in a liner on the ocean, and we arrived in Cape Town. Now, we had friars in Cape Town. We had about 5 or 6 parishes in Cape Town, so we had Irish friars to meet us there. So we spent there 3 weeks, because the Archbishop at the time asked us, would we hear the confessions of the children? There was a big move on for all the children in the Archdiocese to come and have their confessions heard. So we were 2 of us. So we spent there 3 weeks, 2 weeks hearing confessions. And then 1 week then looking at Table Mountain and climbing around places and seeing the beauties of South Africa. It's a beautiful country and lovely people. And after that then we had 3 days and 3 nights train journey up to the Karoo Desert. And I was expecting to see a whole lot of wild animals and all that. And anytime I looked out there, I saw one lone ostrich. He must have been the loneliest creature in the place. And that's all I saw the whole way up until we came to the Victoria Falls. And even then that was fierce disappointing, because it was the dry season and there was only a trickle of water. I said, what more can happen? And of course, the Victoria Falls, when it's in flood, it's absolutely magnificent. And we even have a night rainbow, which is beautiful. So we had our centre was there in Livingston, and we spent a year there then learning language, because we had to go to the bush. Now there was about 75 different tribes in Zambia, so there was usually 4 lingua francas. You had manage one of them, and that was all I was able to do. Anyway, most fellows would manage one, and that would carry you through. And then we were sent out to the various places then. Now, there's no roads or anything like that, no phones, no nothing. We had a jeep. Now, the early men had to walk it. Now, we had to walk also to the out schools, because there was no roads or no nothing, through bushes and forests and everything. But we always had Africans with us who helped us and looked after us and cared for us and protected us, really. They were very good that way, really. They were great people to work with. They were poor people and simple people, yeah. But then we had a very good bishop. He was a Cork man, and he didn't believe in preaching the gospel to people who were hungry. So he always told us, look, do your best to encourage agriculture and gardening and vegetables growing and all that. So along with prayers and that, the big concentration was get the people to feed themselves and not to be depending on handouts, because handouts just made beggars of them, and that's one thing we didn't want to continue on. So we insisted that they could have gardening, and we used to get seed up from South Africa now, which was a good, it would take days to come up.
What kind of seed were you getting?
Maize and beans, peas and stuff like that.
And was it a new way of agriculture for them? Was it a
it was completely new, yeah.
And how did they take to that?
They took to it very well, because they realised now they had more food and more food for their children. And it made an awful difference to their health-wise. Then the sisters ran a clinic and a hospital, and they had mobile units, and they would go out and concentrate on the pregnant mothers because the maternity deaths were very, very high in babies and all that. So when the nuns went out, they did tremendous work. And I always say, and I say it again, when the history of the missions are written, the nuns will be the perils of the whole lot. The way they worked, it wasn't easy for them. Mostly they were Irish and English, yeah. Okay. And then we got some Americans in. And then we had our own local sisters, African sisters. And they fell in and continued to work. Yeah. Oh, we hadn't a clue. Yeah. Even though men came back from the missions and would tell their stories. But still, when you go out there, the poverty of it, that was the one thing that struck me. The name of God in this day and age, the poverty was absolute, it was destitution. You see, the superiors used to come out and see for themselves, so they knew exactly the situation. And the Irish people were very supportive of us. Goodness me, what could we have done without their help? We couldn't have done a thing. We'd be absolutely helpless, only for the people of Ireland. And the Americans that came in later on. But you have to hand it to our own people here. They were more than generous. Yeah. Well, as the old saying in Ireland, there's no fool like an old fool. Yeah, I'm the only one. Okay. The rest of them, I had 8 sisters and 3 brothers. And all the sisters married. And one brother died fairly young. Yeah. And the other 2 were married. Yeah. I didn't actually know. No, sometimes, I'll tell you now when it hit you, when I was doing baptisms, and my little nieces and nephews and all that, you'd say to yourself, wouldn't you love to have a child or 2, But after that's really natural. Yeah, we've always lived with the people, and the people have been very, very generous and very supportive of us. So we would be very close to the people. We'd be noticed for that. No. My father, God rest him now, he was a great father to us. And if he had his way, none of us would be allowed to leave home. That wasn't going to happen with 12 of us. And it used to break his heart when my sister would go off to America or off to England or go nursing and all that. There was 7 or 8 nurses in the family. And they were, he would be dying with his heart out when we'd be leaving. That's the type of man he was. Yeah, they realised that, that how long was I going to be away for? Now it was 10 years. You could come home after 10 years. And then it was changed to 6 years, and then it was changed to 3 years. Well, no, I was only out 2 months when my father died. God be good to him, yeah. And but there was no question of coming back. It took us 11 days by ship to get to Cape Town. There was no plane flights then. Yeah. I'll tell you where I was now. I was in Livingston. The famous Victoria Falls. We were doing our language course there when I got that news. And he was quite healthy when I was leaving and all that, and he was in his early 70s. But anyway, he had a happy death, and that was it. Yeah. You had to accept all these things. And the only thing you could do is, we had no phones or anything, you could only send a telegram. That's all. Yeah. Well, I came home after 8 years. Yeah, and actually some of my family were in England, more than were in America, more than were at home. And they'd come home then to see me. And, when I was there, at that time we used to get a holiday for 6 months. Now, there was 3 months you could take a holiday. The other 3 months you had to study and work in a friary. That was all right. Yeah. They'd remember you all right, your own age group and things like that. But my small little nieces and nephews would know who I was. I concentrated on agriculture. Because I remember what the bishop said to me one day. He said, look, what's the use in us preaching the gospel to people who are hungry? And I concentrated on that, on agriculture and we used to get seed up from South Africa and everything, and get them to grow plots and all that. And it took off like wildfire because they realised, now we're not hungry anymore, we have food. And we have food for our children. And there was less children dying, and this way you noticed it first. There was awful mortality rate amongst the kids. Now, it was absolutely... Would you believe this? In 1 week, I buried 57 children. in our cemetery in the hospital. 57 little kids. I said, this has to stop. Malnutrition, kwashiorkor, disease, malaria, everything. Yeah. So then a woman said to me one day, her father, she said, I have to have about 14 pregnancies, she said, hoping that 2 of them will be there when I'm dying. There'll only be 2 left. And that's how they looked at it, The poor women suffered a lot. I must say you have to admire the African woman, what they went through. But look, I must say the sisters did great work for them. And not alone the Irish sisters, but the African sisters also, for the women. And if you can get the women going, your parish is fine. They go off like wildfire. Yeah. Our government has let the people down very badly in many ways, especially in that way. There should be no poor people in this country, a wealthy country, a country that has good crops every year, and yet how many people are hungry? I think that's a disgrace. Yeah. Now, having said that, I haven't the answer either. Well, there's a certain materialism now. When I was growing up now, the faith was very, very strong. And, we were churched in and churched out of a type of thing. That was the way it was. And I think it's a much healthier atmosphere now. I do, yeah, and I think that, it's only right that people should make up their own minds. Christ never forced anybody to follow him. He did say, come follow me. But he didn't say, if you don't do this, you get... and I think it's much better for the people to make up their own, and you'll have a healthier type of Christianity. When people are able to think for themselves and do things for themselves. Near Angola, I was near the Angola border. Okay. No, that was a dangerous spot. I always seemed to be, sent to these troubled areas. I was there for over 20 years. Now they used to come in and raid us every so often, and then the South Africans used to come in and bomb us. There was a raid. Now, strangely enough, they never came to attack me now. They would attack the people around and take what they had, their goods and stuff like that, But somehow or another, see, they had a certain respect for the priest or for the church. Not for me personally, but they didn't bother me that way. Well, Angola, you see, itself was very Christian, so that helped in many ways. Yeah. Well, we had to form parishes, and we had the usual classes for preparing people for baptism, for the sacraments, for marriage and things like that, and bury the dead. But above all, what we had to do, which was very important, the area was so vast. Now, the Diocese of Livingston is 2.5 times the size of Ireland. And there was only 55 priests in it, nuns, and 45 nuns or something like that. But we had to educate and train the Christians themselves to be missionaries to themselves. So we had these classes every so often. Maybe take 3 weeks, bring in a group, go get them to teach them the rudiments of the faith and what to do and all that. Now, some of them could read and write, more of them couldn't. And, you had to cope with that. And then you sent them out to look after their own people. Because we could only look after a certain amount. And we would teach them how to bury the dead, how to baptize and pray and help the sick. Because they had to do it. When we talk now, I could be 100 miles away from the border. So we could go out there about 3 times a year out to the border, and you'd stay there night and day, and they'd all gather together, and then you'd have masses, and you'd have baptism, confirmations, and then they would tell you who had died, and they would keep a list of all that for you. So they were very good that way. Yeah. Well, you see, a lot of us got involved in development, and especially agriculture. Now that was fortunate because I came from a farming community myself. And the little knowledge I had, I was able to use that. And we got seed and stuff up from South Africa and all that, and we gave it out to them free for the first time. We said, that's all you get now, that's the handout you get. Next time you have to pay. But with actual fact, they would keep the seed themselves. And it went on that way. Yeah. Well, the school now, we had to start off, the schools would be all grass, mud huts, thatch roof and mud walls and all that. And then we had two teacher training colleges in the diocese, and trained we only a 2-year course, and they would go then to the out schools and start off a school and gather the children. And sure, maybe you could have maybe 40 children one, then half would be missing the next day. They said, let's get used, especially the girls, they were the worst of all. They couldn't understand why they had to stay there day in and day out. And then we'd have to run after them and bring them back. And you say to the parents, but why didn't you bring them back? Oh, they wouldn't go back for us. But look, it started that way. And then eventually they realised the importance of education. And sure, look, the thing flew off then. Yeah. I work out now as a Zambia. I work all the time with the local people, especially in agriculture, developing and feeding them and things like that, and building clinics. That was a thing I was very strong with, because especially for the women, and a number of babies dying, a number of mothers dying in childbirth and all that. And one thing led to another. I was surprised. I didn't think there was anybody aware of what I was doing. What happened? I didn't even go to State House.
Okay.
I was too far away from it. I got a letter from the president, yeah, honouring me for my work, my humanitarian work or something like that. And then he sent a delegate down to me with what do you call the medal or whatever it was. Because I don't know where it is. Somebody has, and I haven't seen it for years. I often say to myself now, that's very good and all that, but that's not going to get me into heaven.
Yeah, of course.
I know. That was an honour for the Irish people. Yeah,
Yeah.
I know, that isn't that. I know, what do you call it? There are more important things in life, I think, than... we had a lot of refugees coming in from Angola, and all they came was the clothes on their backs, and they had to cross this terrible river called the Kwanda River, which was full of crocodiles and things like that. And sure, how many of them were taken and eaten and never made it? And we used to be waiting on the bank for them to come. God help them. And then the mother would be crying her son was missing. And so we knew immediately the son was killed by a crocodile or something like that. So we had to, that was the hardest part of it. But after all, we were able to get food to them. And so once, as the fellow said, once the hunger is gone after them. And then we got them to cut grass and poles and all and build shelters for themselves. And that one thing started off another. That's how you had to do it. We were so far away, you see, from the government. Yeah. Oh, it was a huge area, sure. Sure, what do you call it? The parish we were in, she was the size of Ireland. The parish, Yeah. Actually, it was just a cluster of huts. And in the middle of it then, we would have a clinic or a church, whatever it was. It was like a circle, like a wheel. Actually, we used the model of the wheel. In the centre of it, you'd have the church and the clinic. And then outside, then you'd have all the rest. Oh, there was no doctors.
No, okay.
Oh, God, no. Only we had nuns and sisters. But sure, some of the sisters were as good as doctors. Oh, God, they were marvellous. I often saw them there staying up all night, keeping a mother alive while she was trying to deliver a baby in difficult circumstances and things like that. We don't know the half of it. Yeah. I do, and I thank God for it, and I thank the people for it especially, because they were very supportive and very good and very kind to us. And especially now if you were sick, they'd all come crowding around. And I think they used to say, in case you die. I know, they really meant it. But that's one thing they didn't want to see us being ill or anything like that. They were very good. Yeah. Well, what you call, I was ill. I was nearly lost a lung. We never came to any full conclusion what it was. But one doctor was going to remove the lung. And another doctor came along, a second opinion. He said, this fella has never had any history of antibiotics or anything like that. He says, we'll pump the antibiotics into him first. They worked. I still have me 2 lungs. I didn't want to leave, but you see, we were coming to this stage then of Africanization. And then I realised, and I said to the bishop, I said, I'm only holding a post here. I said, and I had 2 African priests, which were far more competent than I was in the language and everything else. And I said, what's the use of me staying here? Let them take over now. I said, isn't that what we came out here to do? We didn't come out here to stay here. I said, let them take over now. And responsibility, so I handed it. Lock, start and barrel over to them.
How did you feel personally doing that?
I felt bad sad about it. I didn't want to go, but I had to go. Yeah. Sure, a lot of them would be dead and gone now. You know, I had great friends. Yeah. Yeah.
I do.
We tried once. It became a bit dangerous. I brought out 12 hurleys one time. And sure, I was a mad hatter I was. And sure, what do you call it? They weren't going for the ball, they were going for one another. So I said, oh, come on, give them back. No, football was they absolutely loved football. Yeah. And one of the best gifts you could give them a football. Yeah. So sure, they were simple people, you know, great people. Yeah. Maize was the main thing. Now I liked maize when it was cooked, but then it had to be fried before I could eat it. You know, just stodgy, to be like spuds. You know, like that kind of a thing. But you know, you had to fry it, boil it first, and then cook it first, and then fry it. You could eat it then. It was nice. Yeah. You see, we had plenty of fruit, tomatoes, and stuff like that. You could grow anywhere, even out the sink. The seeds would wash out of the sink, and the tomatoes grew up in the sink.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, it was that easy. Yeah. Oh, there was pagan festivals they had.
So what was that like?
For example, no, they had circumcision. That was a big thing.
Okay.
And no lady would go near that. If the lady went near the circumcision camp, she got yeah, and that was a standing rule. Wow. Yeah, that would go on for several weeks, and the young men would be taught the traditions and customs of his tribe and all and things like that, and how to handle girls and women and the usual thing. Now, even ourselves wouldn't be allowed into those kind of secrets, you know. Yeah. But we imagine if nothing left in the imagination anyway. Yeah. Oh gosh, they would. Yeah. Especially when the chief would arrive. Okay. Oh my God, the chief was like the Pope. Everything stopped. Everything had to stop. The chief was the man who decided where the site was going to be. So you had to keep always on the chief on your right side, and to pick a good site for you. Well, the food and education, yeah. He realised that the lives of the people were getting much better because we were able to educate them and supply food to them and medicine and things like that. And when they saw that there was less mothers in pregnancy dying, that was a big thing, especially since you see so many little kids dying, you know. Yeah. Actually, you know, they were very good people in their own way, you know. And one thing about it was, they always received us very graciously, you know. Yeah. I don't know, I often ask the older men, I went out in at 51, and they were out there since 1930. And it was a different thing altogether, you know, there was no roads, I don't know, they hadn't even a vehicle. Yeah. You could travel the Zambezi in canoe, and then when you came to the rapids, you had to pull the canoe out and get the canoe up to the other side. Yeah. I should, you know, as I always say, wasn't it lucky we were young and foolish?
Yes. Yes. You know.
It's a different church.
Yeah.
And, you know, a lot of it I wouldn't go along with.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
But I think people should have more say in, you know, in things like that. They should have more involvement. You see, we were forced to do it in Africa because you had one priest and you could have 5,000 or 6,000 people. So you had no choice but to involve the people. Here there was a kind of a glut of clergy.
We were spoiled.
Spoiled rotten. Yeah. And you know, out there in Africa, one thing, the difference between the church in Africa and the church here, the people out there own their church.
Okay.
When you ask the people in Ireland that question, they kind of look at you and say, yeah, I think it's very important to own your church. You're going nowhere. You'll always have them and us. You know, and I think that's wrong. I think the Lord is shouting at us and our ears are deaf. The Lord is shouting at us to give the church back to the people. I think, I don't deny that, but I think that's the big message we have to learn today, to give the church back to the people. Yeah, like when you come put the clergy together, we're a very small minority. When you look at it that way, you know. I think it's shameful in a country that's full and plenty that we still have people, so many people, depending on handouts. Now, why haven't we tackled that the right way? Yeah, but I appreciate that. But I think it's very important also to get those people to stand on their own feet.
Yeah.
And do things that they can do things for themselves, not to be waiting for handouts. I think one thing that we have lost, that we have failed to do, and that's listen to the wisdom of the laity.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think that's very important for us to open our ears and listen to what the laity want, not what we want. You know, we'd like a little stereotype church with no problems and that. But when you're dealing with ordinary people, they have families, they have difficulties, they have problems, they're out of work perhaps, they have sick members, you know. And all that is part of the suffering church. Yeah. Oh, let's say, you know, I don't know, I see the hand of God in a lot of what has happened to me. In fact, all that has happened to me, you know. That I was born out in Kilmannon in a small farm with 12 of us, and we had to work hard to eat out an existence and feed ourselves and things like that and go to school and all that. And when I come to think of it, like there was 12 of us there, when I think of my parents, my mother and father, there was 12 of us there, she never had to bring a doctor. My mother was the doctor, the nurse, everything. You know, that's the type of people we were. We should be thankful to God that we had such people to look after us. Yeah. And they're still there. Yeah. Yeah. I say to them, you know, have courage, don't weaken. And like when you come to think of it now, the opportunities that young people have to compared to what we had, you know, it's marvellous. And more power to them. I'm all for it. And it's marvellous to see that young people have so many openings now to grow and develop. And I think that's wonderful. Yeah. That's a big step forward in Ireland, you know. Huge. Yeah, a huge step. But we have to examine ourselves and ask ourselves, how did we present the faith to the people? Do this, don't do that, there's do's and don'ts. But I don't think that was the right approach. Looking back on it now, you know. And I think another thing too was that somehow or another the family, to me the family is the first church. And it's the first school. And I think that's important. And I think the church has moved a bit too far away from the family. I think that's important. The values that the family has, you know, the church couldn't have those values without the family. First of all, I'd say the church had too much authority in families and things like that, and didn't let parents grow up and think for themselves. I think we interfered a bit too much there, and now we're paying the price for it. Yeah, it's very easy for us to blame the laity. You know, we have to blame ourselves, and we have to look into ourselves and see where we went wrong. I know there's faults on both sides, but we were the ones who were supposed to be leading the people. Yeah. I think the present Pope is doing a good job. He's a compassionate man, and he's not issuing big dogmatic statements. You know, he's kind of heart-to-heart stuff, and so that's what we need. You know. Yeah, well, it was a big change for me to come from Africa to Kilkenny, because I mean I was in a parish now the size of Munster, and there was just 2 of us, you know, and we had 57 out centres, so we could go out for 3 weeks at a time, and the people looked after us, and you go from church to church, and you'd have mass and baptisms and confirmations and bury the dead, and they tell you who died and who didn't die and who was sick and all that, and anointings and all that. We don't have that. It's a very limited, but it's nice though.
And you feel welcome and part of it, like you feel.
Oh gosh, yeah. Ah, Lord, yes. Yeah. And the people of Kilkenny are very supportive of us, and very, very good to us now. You know, you have to say that. Really, really good. Yeah. You didn't know an old man, Father Bonaventure,
Oh yeah.
did you?
Oh,
Boney.
yeah.
When we were young, it was only seldom we'd come from Kilmanny to Kilkenny, maybe once or twice a year. But if we met Boney in the town, we had to go down and kneel down and kiss his cord.
Oh wow.
That was a custom and a
Wow,
tradition.
Okay.
And when the friar would come out questing, you know, what do you call it, they come into the house and they'd bless us all and pray for us all, and they go to the cow house and bless the cows and the horse and all that. And that was marvellous, beautiful, yeah. You know, it was very easy to condemn them when we want to condemn them, you know. We'd have been no better when we were young, and we hadn't the money, we hadn't the wherewith. I was out with the family, I was 12, and we had one bicycle between us. And I was number 10 in the family, so to seldom I got the bike. But that was life in the country.
That's it.
There was always the horse and cart and the donkey and cart, and well, that was all right, that was fine too. We had the bat down, those big bats out in the country. We took it down, we said, to make a great boat. Mother was looking for the tin bat. We were in the river with the tin bat. Oh, yeah.